Today we're talking about fortune cookie wisdom from Solomon.
Wow. So we're going to look at some more really great verses in chapter 6 in the book of Proverbs. So that's what we're talking about today on HC Daily.
You're listening to another episode of HC Daily, a daily devotional podcast that you can listen to at home or on the go. We believe that you can grow as much as you want to grow spiritually, and this podcast can be a part of your daily growth plan. So, whether you're watching on YouTube, listening on Spotify, or your favorite podcast app, we're glad you're here. Now, let's join our hosts, Jeff Forrester and Chris Zarbaugh, in the studio.
So, Jeff.
Yes.
I spoke at a camp last week, and I was telling tall tales that were true of me getting in fights when I was younger. I grew up in a rough area. We used to fight all the time, right? So here's my question for you. I know that you used to box on purpose. You guys used to box when you were kids. So my question is, when is the last time, how long has it been since you've actually hit another person in a fight? Not in a boxing match, but in an actual fight.
Yeah.
Or maybe you don't want to admit it.
Yeah, no.
Was it last week?
No, I was in my 20s.
You're in your 20s?
So, and it was, I used to work with gangs in Chicago in a ministry that served gang members. And we had a bus, and we'd pick kids up, teenagers, gang members, to come to church sometimes and that kind of thing. Come around the corner, and it was the Bulls had just won the championship. So kids are out just going crazy, doing all kinds of crazy stuff in the streets. And somebody threw a brick through a window of our bus. So I jumped off the bus, took off chasing these kids down an alley. When I come around the corner, there were a whole bunch of kids standing there with bats and chains. They were just waiting. So that kid did it on purpose to draw us out of the bus. And so we took off running. And so I stayed back. Everybody's running towards the bus. And it turned into a little bit of a scrum there just for a second, threw a couple punches to make sure everybody could get on the bus. And the bus was moving down the road.
Yeah.
Right? Because we're go. We're running to catch up on the bus, jump on the bus. And I had to fight a couple gang members too. So my last actual fist fight was a gang fight, just to,
to throw that out there.
Let you know how tough I am. Yeah. Not that I was in a gang, but I had to fight off gang members in Chicago.
Well, you know what? Out of all the stories that you could have told about you punching somebody, that one makes you actually look good. Which is
absolutely. All my stories make me look good. What are you talking about?
If they don't, you just change the story.
Yeah, you got to make it better.
Change the facts of the stories.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. Good.
Yeah. Is that all you wanted?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's 3 minutes in.
Okay. Well, that's good. Yeah. So, boys and girls, don't punch people, but use your strength to protect others.
Okay. Sure. We'll go with that.
Okay, so Proverbs chapter 6 is where we're at today. We're just continuing on looking at practical everyday wisdom. And in this passage, he's going to give financial wisdom. He's going to give us some hard work wisdom. He's going to give us some moral things that all packed into just a few verses. So we're only going to read a few today. Here's what he says in Proverbs chapter 6. My child, if you have put up your security, let me start over. My child, if you have put up security for a friend's debt, or agreed to guarantee the debt of a stranger, if you've trapped yourself by your agreement and you're caught by what you said, follow my advice and save yourself, for you've placed yourself at your friend's mercy. Now swallow your pride. Go and beg to have your name erased. Don't put it off. Do it now. Don't rest until you do. Save yourself like a gazelle escaping from a hunter, like a bird fleeing from a net. Then, that's all he says about that. Then he says, take a lesson from the ants, you lazy bones. Learn from their ways and become wise. Though they have no prince or governor or ruler to make them work, they labor hard all summer, gathering food for the winter. But you, lazy bones, how long will you sleep? When will you wake up? A little extra sleep, a little more slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest. Then poverty will pounce on you like a bandit. Scarcity will attack you like an armed robber. And that's all he has to say about that. Then he says, what are worthless and wicked people like? They're constant liars. They're signaling their deceit with a wink of the eye, a nudge of the foot, or the wiggle of fingers. Their perverted hearts plot evil, and they constantly stir up trouble, but they will be destroyed suddenly, broken in an instant beyond all hope of healing. And then he's just done talking about that. Sneaky people. And then he said there's 6 things the Lord hates. No, 7 things he detests. Haughty eyes, a lying tongue, hands that kill the innocent, a heart that plots evil, feet that race to do wrong, a false witness who pours out lies, and a person who sows discord in a family. And then you can just go on. You can go on through the rest of the chapter. But we just kind of wanted to give a little idea of these little nuggets of wisdom that he gives. And this is why it's so good to spend time in the book of Proverbs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting, too. I know that we didn't get to it, but he covers the gamut. I talked about it before the podcast started. He says in verse 26, "For a prostitute will bring you out to poverty, but sleeping with another man's wife will cost you your life."
Yeah.
So he covers the gamut, buddy. He's all over the place on wisdom.
Well, then he says, "Can a man scoop a flame into his lap and not have his clothes catch on fire?"
Can he walk on hot coals and not blister his feet?
That's right.
Yeah, it's so interesting. He has wisdom across the board. And I find it very interesting that he goes from subject to subject. But even in this chapter, he at least spends 3 or 4 verses on the same topic. There are other chapters in Proverbs where he literally will give the fortune cookie, which is why I said at the beginning.
Yeah, sure.
Just like one line.
One sentence.
Just one sentence about this topic. Then I'll go one sentence about another topic, then another one.
Yeah.
But it all is great wisdom.
Yeah, so he starts off here. Let's just go chunk by chunk here and unpack it. So here in the beginning, he's talking to his son about finances. I think it's important for us to raise our kids and the young people around us, teaching them how to manage their finances. In this situation, he's saying, be careful, don't be a cosigner. That's what he's saying here. And if you found yourself co-signing for somebody that you don't really know, man, you need to get out of that right away as much as you can, right? Humble yourself, swallow your pride. Don't put it off. Do it now. Don't wait. And be really careful about that. And, I know multiple people who've had their personal finances ruined by somebody they thought would keep their word, and they co-signed for them. And, it's ruined their credit because somebody else didn't keep their word, you know? And so Solomon's just really smart guy there, because you would think, oh, I just want to be a nice guy. I just want to be a nice person. So co-sign. And he says, hey, be careful about that. And he says, save yourself like a gazelle leaping from a hunter, like a bird fleeing from a net. Hey, most financial mechanisms are designed to catch you like prey, right? And so that's what he's warning there.
Yeah, I have a totally random story just because my grandfather, who's now passed away, my mom told me the story that when he was younger, a friend came to him. So my grandfather's friend came to him and said, hey, man, I'm in a real deep situation. I need a loan for my family. Will you co-sign? And so my grandfather co-signed, and then he took his own life. And so my mom said that my grandfather, for 5 years, paid that bill and never said a word about it.
Wow.
Never talked about it.
Wow.
But paid off that loan.
When you co-sign, you're promising to pay something
right
on behalf of somebody else if they don't, right?
Yeah. So his friend was kind of like, not cool.
Yeah. So it's amazing how, you think our modern circumstances are so, complex and all this stuff. But Solomon is so incredibly practical, right? Everything applies to today, too. And in this one, hey, be careful about your finances. Don't let other people control your finances. That's really going to be the theme that he talks about throughout the Proverbs is, you seize the moment with your finances. Don't let other people take advantage of you. And
I think that everybody who has a teenager can relate to this next chunk of verses.
Take a lesson from the ant, you lazy bones.
Yes. Yeah. And he says, let me tell you something. He says, you can have a little bit more sleep and a little bit more slumber, and then poverty is going to come, and they're going to rob you like a bandit. They're going to pounce on you.
Yep.
And everybody knows in the first century, well, if you live in church world for a while, you know that there's examples in the Bible that talk about, how dangerous the road from Jerusalem to Jericho is.
Oh, yeah.
And as you walk down the road, bandits sit on the side of the road, and then they pounce out, and they come upon you. And then what they do is
they're sitting it's a really narrow spot, and they kind of sit up on the edges of the cliffs and then jump down on you. Yeah.
And what they do is they steal from you, and then immediately you find yourself on a journey with no money.
Right.
And so this is the comparison. He says, yeah, go ahead and be lazy. And then just like a bandit will come on you and rob you,
right,
you'll find yourself in poverty before you know it.
Right. And he's not saying that lazy people get robbed all the time. What he's saying is laziness leads to surprises of what happened.
Right.
How come my life didn't turn out as great as everybody else's, right? And we're shocked by our circumstances. And he said sometimes it's laziness will lead us to that. I will tell you this because, like I said, I've probably read through the book of Proverbs 300 times, maybe more, maybe 500 times.
I think I've read it like 502.
Yeah, you know what? Now that I think about it, it's 505. But hundreds of times I've read through the book of Proverbs, and so many things just bounce around in my head, and I forget. You forget you know them until it pops in your head. So one of my favorite things in my backyard is I have a hammock, that's on like a hammock like frame, and it just swings perfect in the wind, and it's just great. So sometimes I like to go lay down in that. And when I got in it the other day, I quoted that: a little extra sleep, a little more slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest. And I just laid there with my hands on my belly and just sleeping, enjoying the sun. But I didn't quote the next part of that verse, which is how Christians do a lot of times. We quote our favorite part, and we ignore the rest.
Of course, right? It's like wives, submit to your husbands.
Yeah.
And we put a period there.
Right.
right. Submit, woman.
Yeah. Hey, which is about right, I think.
Yeah. Even though that, that's.
What's the rest of it?
Yeah, right. The husband's called to lay down his life.
Right. As Christ gave his life for the church. Right.
And so what kind of wife would not want to submit to that sort of self-sacrifice?
Yeah.
But we don't like that part of it. We just like to say submit.
Right. So it's really interesting as you go through the book of Proverbs, Solomon compares the fool and the wise man over and over and over again. I mean, this is a theme throughout the book. And the other thing that he compares is lazy people and industrious people, right? And those two things come up over and over again. So that's just a little sample there, but you'll find it probably a dozen times. And then he talks about worthless people for a minute and wicked people, and he kind of compares those together. And he said they're constantly lying, and then he's warning his son, watch out for the person who signals with the wink of an eye or the nudge of a foot or the wiggle of fingers. Listen, if you're having somebody that's trying to get your attention privately and go along with me on this, that's a pretty slick person, and ultimately those kind of people are trying to shoot moves, and eventually there's going to have a moment when they're destroyed suddenly. So if you align your career with somebody who's sneaking, if you align your life with somebody who's always trying to shoot a move, don't be surprised when the destruction comes quickly. All the house of cards fall all at one time. It's not a surprise. Solomon's warning about hooking up with sneaky people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. Yeah. And then he moves on and he talks about these are 6 things that the Lord hates. 7 things he detests. Hey, can we just talk about this for a minute? Do you ever notice that just a very few times in the Bible, like the 7 deadly sins,
sure.
Yeah. And it's like God will throw out a list. And for some reason, we think that list is a list that is to be obeyed and feared. Definitive, more than any other list, right? And it's so interesting for me because Solomon just sort of throws it out there. And this really hasn't made this is not on anybody's refrigerator.
Right. Exactly. And he doesn't even unpack it. He just says these things and moves on.
Yeah, right. But haughty eyes, a lying tongue, hands that kill the innocent, a heart that plots evil, feet that race to do wrong, a false witness that pours out lies, a person that shows discord among the family. Man, all those things are different. And all those things I hate as well.
Yes. So haughty eyes, what are haughty eyes?
Yeah, haughty eyes is a proud look, isn't it?
Proud look, yeah.
Yeah, proud look, yeah.
You ever see that person, you just think they have a punchable face?
Well, I'm looking at you.
Well, I was staring right at you when I did that.
Oh, you were trying to do that to me too. Yeah.
But that haughty. So haughty would mean prideful look, and that's what God's saying. God just hates that person who, and you know what he's talking about. He's not talking about he hates the person.
Right.
He said, I hate this behavior. Those people just walk around with a swagger, just too big for their britches kind of people, and he just hates that kind of behavior. So that's the first one. A lying tongue, obviously. You can't trust a liar.
Right.
So.
Yeah. So Solomon,
wow.
I've never sneezed on a podcast before.
That's fantastic.
Wow. I was just going to say,
wow.
Yeah, I know, right? God bless you. He already does. So Proverbs continues on with all these words of wisdom. And I think that it's my belief that if a counselor, so my daughter just went into counseling, right? She graduated from college. If a counselor decided to memorize the wisdom of Solomon, then they would probably have almost covered the gamut of life of advice.
Yep.
And so it's like, and again, he goes from topic to topic, but if you take the wisdom and you apply it. So I personally don't love counseling. When my daughter changed her major, she changed it and she went into counseling. And I thought, are you sure? But, she's been in it for a couple of years and she says, I absolutely love it.
Wow.
So she just started a brand new job in Florida, by the way.
Yeah.
I moved her down. Monday.
Yeah. Wow. So that's a big decision, right? To go into that. But I would agree with you. There's a temptation maybe to move over with the godless side of counseling, and make it all about the human, from a humanist standpoint.
Which, by the way, most of that is good. I would say
a lot of the science behind counseling is good, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of our psychology stuff comes from a very humanistic mindset, and the way to offset that and get a biblical view that kind of align with the science of counseling would be to apply biblical wisdom. The best place to do that would be Proverbs. So I'm affirming that with you.
Yes, yeah. And let me also unpack what I just said, which is a lot of times what ends up happening is a person could be like a total atheist, and they'll say, "Oh, I don't believe in God at all." But what they do is they give practical and good advice, and they don't even know it, but it's actually godly advice.
Oh, right.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, right. All truth is God's truth.
That's what I was.
Right.
That's what I was thinking when I was saying it.
Yeah.
I was thinking like all truth that seems like it benefits a human person for a person that does not claim to be a Christian. Most of it is just because that's how God wired us.
Right.
And it's God's truths anyway, which is why I think most great counseling is good anyway, because it comes from God anyway.
Yeah. So I think the only warning that we would have is, so all truth is God's truth. Truth applied is wisdom, right? And so he tells us here at the very beginning of Proverbs chapter 1, verse 7, he says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. So I think when it comes to counseling of any kind, when we're looking for help, we're not just looking for somebody's best opinion, and we're not just looking for the smartest person or the person who studied a little bit more than us. What we're looking for, I think, if you want to be a godly person and get godly wisdom that will extend your life, like he says, and make your life better, you have to find somebody who first fears the Lord and then applies God's language and God's worldview with the scientific benefit of the scientific training. Otherwise, the natural way is to start with the human, and we make it a humanistic view. And that winds up always because we start at the wrong place. Either you start with God and God's ways, or you start with the human and try to make the human better. And there's no good advice that's going to make the human better without it being God's truth. And I think that's the differentiation there. So it's incredibly important for us to look for people who use God's words. This is why you and I, we talk about it a lot as we develop our messages on the weekends. We want to use a lot of Scripture, as much as we can, because my words about it doesn't matter nearly as much as anybody else's. It doesn't matter any more than anybody else's opinion. What matters the most is what God's words say. So let's let God's words speak, and then we'll kind of unpack it and say, hey, have you ever thought about what these words mean? That's kind of how we start. We don't just give up and give nice inspirational speeches on Sunday mornings, do we?
Right.
We center them around God's words.
Yeah, and regardless of the amount of Scripture, every thought that comes out of a communicator's mouth on a Sunday should be directly connected to the principle and the lessons of that Scripture.
Yeah, should be.
So it should be, right. So in other words, if you can give a message that has, for instance, only a few verses, then you better spend most of your time as a communicator directly unpacking the application of those verses.
That's right.
Which is rooted in God's truth.
Which is the idea, if you've ever heard the phrase expository preaching. Right. Some people think expository preaching just means start at the first verse and go to the last verse, unpack all the ideas in between. But expository just means to expose the truth of the passage. So whatever size passage. Jesus didn't quote whole chapters, but when he did quote scriptures, he unpacked what those meant, right? So,
yeah, that's great.
Yeah, so anyways, I think we can stop there, don't you?
Yeah,
Did you have anything else?
No, I don't think so, other than just once again, encouraging our readers just to cling on to Proverbs if you haven't made that a habit.
All this wisdom is there for you, and it's not hard. As a matter of fact, if you download the YouVersion app, you can actually tell it to read a chapter to you
out loud
while you're driving down the road.
Yes.
You can listen to Solomon, the wisdom of the wisest man, apart from Jesus, the wisest man that ever lived. And this book was written when Solomon was at his best, right? We're going to pivot into Ecclesiastes in a couple of days, and that's when he's not at his best. But the book of Proverbs is when he's at his very best. And so you have the benefit of the wisest man in the world riding along with you, giving you a little bit of wisdom every single day. You can let Solomon be your mentor.
That sounds great to me. Yeah. We'll see you next time on HC Daily.
Thank you for joining us today. If you enjoyed this podcast, please help us spread the word by liking this episode and sharing it on your social media platforms. Be sure to leave a comment and review, and don't forget to give us 5 stars. When you do, you help us reach even more people who need a daily devotional like HC Daily. If you'd like to hear more from Chris and Jeff, they're both teaching pastors at Heritage Church, located in Southeast Michigan. You can get more of their messages by clicking on the Messages tab at heritagechurch.com. Be sure to join us again soon for another episode of HC Daily.